The clinking of crystal against crystal echoed through the elegantly appointed dining room, a soundtrack to the comfortable rhythm of our lives. Victoria and I were hosting our usual Tuesday night dinner party, a tradition amongst our close-knit circle of friends. I surveyed the scene with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter, the air thick with the pleasant aroma of the roasted lamb I'd meticulously prepared. Victoria, radiant in a sapphire blue dress, held court at the head of the table, her animated storytelling captivating our guests. She had a way of drawing people in, of making them feel like they were the most important person in the room. It was one of the many things I loved about her. Or rather, one of the many things I had loved about her. Lately, a subtle shift had occurred, a barely perceptible tremor in the foundation of our seemingly perfect life. It wasn't anything concrete, nothing I could put my finger on. It was more of a feeling, a disquieting sense that something was off. Victoria seemed distant, preoccupied. Her laughter, while still present, lacked its usual warmth. Her touch, once a constant comfort, had become fleeting, almost perfunctory. I attributed it to stress. We both worked demanding jobs. The pressures of our respective careers often spilled over into our personal lives. I tried to be more attentive, suggesting weekend getaways, surprise date nights, small gestures of affection. But my efforts were met with a polite indifference, a gentle pushback that left me feeling more confused than ever. I watched her across the table, her eyes sparkling as she recounted a humorous anecdote about a recent work event. She looked happy, genuinely so. But as I studied her face, I couldn't shake the feeling that her joy was somehow disconnected from me. It was as if she was performing for an audience, playing the role of the devoted wife, while her true self remained hidden, locked away behind an invisible wall. The thought sent a chill down my spine, a premonition of something I couldn't quite comprehend, but something I instinctively knew was deeply unsettling. I pushed the thought away, telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was simply overthinking things. But the feeling lingered, a nagging unease that cast a shadow over the otherwise pleasant evening. I raised my glass, offering a toast to our friends, to our shared laughter, to the comfortable familiarity of our lives. But even as I spoke the words, a small voice inside me whispered that things were not as they seemed, that the picture of domestic bliss we presented to the world was slowly, irrevocably, beginning to crack. The unease that had settled over me during the dinner party lingered long after our guests had departed. Victoria and I moved through the familiar rituals of our evening routine, clearing the table, loading the dishwasher, preparing for bed in a silence that felt heavier than usual. I tried to bridge the gap, to initiate a conversation, but my attempts were met with short, clipped responses, her attention seemingly focused elsewhere. She claimed she was tired, that she'd had a particularly stressful day at work, but I sensed a deeper disconnect, a withdrawal that went beyond mere fatigue. As we lay in bed, the space between us felt vast, an unbridgeable chasm that separated us not just physically, but emotionally. I reached out to her, my hand tentatively resting on her arm, but she flinched slightly, pulling away as if my touch was an intrusion. The rejection stung, a sharp prick of pain that resonated deep within me. I rolled over, turning my back to her, feigning sleep, but my mind was racing, replaying the events of the evening, searching for clues, for any indication of what might be causing this growing distance between us. I thought about our life together, the years we'd spent building our relationship, the shared dreams and aspirations that had once bound us so closely. We had met in college, a chance encounter in a literature class that sparked an instant connection. We were drawn to each other's intelligence, our shared passion for art and music, and a quirky sense of humor that made us laugh until our sides ached. Our relationship had blossomed quickly, a whirlwind of romantic gestures, late-night conversations, and shared adventures. We were inseparable, two halves of a whole, our lives intertwined in a way that felt both natural and inevitable. We married shortly after graduation, eager to start our life together, to build a future filled with love, laughter, and shared experiences. We had achieved so much together, both personally and professionally. We had built a beautiful home, successful careers, and a strong network of friends and family who loved and supported us. From the outside, our life looked perfect, a picture of domestic bliss. But lately, I had begun to question the reality of that picture, to wonder if the happiness we projected to the world was merely a facade, a carefully constructed illusion that masked a deeper, more troubling truth. I closed my eyes, willing myself to sleep, but the questions continued to swirl in my mind, a relentless tide of doubt and uncertainty that threatened to engulf me. I knew, deep down, that something was terribly wrong, that the woman I loved was slipping away from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. The following weeks were a blur of escalating suspicion and mounting anxiety. Victoria's distance grew more pronounced, her excuses more frequent and less convincing. She was always busy, always working late, always unavailable. Her phone became her constant companion, a shield against my attempts to connect with her. She would disappear into the other room to take calls, her voice hushed, her expression guarded. When I questioned her, she would brush me off, claiming it was work, a client, a colleague. But I knew she was lying. The gut feeling that something was amiss had solidified into a certainty, a cold, hard knot of dread that settled in my stomach. I started paying closer attention, observing her behavior, analyzing her words, searching for any clue that might reveal the truth. I noticed the way she would flinch when I touched her, the way she would avoid my gaze, the way her smile seemed strained, forced. I found myself scrutinizing her every move, every word, every expression, like a detective piecing together a puzzle. The more I looked, the more I saw, the more convinced I became that my suspicions were justified. One evening, while Victoria was in the shower, I couldn't resist the temptation any longer. I knew it was wrong, a violation of her privacy, but the need to know, to confirm my suspicions, overwhelmed my sense of morality. I picked up her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The phone was locked, but I knew her passcode. I had always prided myself on our openness, our lack of secrets. We had never felt the need to hide anything from each other. But now, as I entered the code, I felt a wave of shame wash over me, a sense of betrayal that mirrored the betrayal I suspected she was inflicting on me. The phone unlocked, revealing the home screen. I hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt momentarily eclipsing my resolve. But the urge to know was too strong. I opened her messaging app, my eyes scanning the list of conversations. There were several from colleagues, a few from friends, and then one from a name I didn't recognize. The conversation was lengthy, spanning several weeks, the messages filled with intimate details, suggestive language, and veiled references to secret rendezvous. My blood ran cold. It was worse than I had imagined. Victoria was having an affair. The discovery of the messages was like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless, reeling. I felt a surge of anger, a white-hot rage that coursed through my veins. How could she do this to me? To us? After all we had been through, all we had built together. The betrayal was profound, a violation of trust that shattered the foundation of our relationship. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But something held me back. A cold, calculating part of me, a part one didn't recognize, urged me to stay calm, to gather more information. I needed to know the full extent of her deceit. I scrolled through the messages, each one a fresh wound, a testament to her infidelity. The man's name was Mark. He was a colleague of hers, someone I had met on several occasions at company events. He was married with children. The messages were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. They discussed their secret meetings, their stolen moments, their plans for the future. A future that didn't include me. I felt sick to my stomach, the weight of her betrayal crushing me. I wanted to throw up, to erase the images that were seared into my mind. But I forced myself to keep reading, to absorb the full extent of her deceit. As I delved deeper into the conversation, I discovered something even more shocking. There were references to other men, other encounters. Victoria wasn't just having an affair with Mark. She was involved with multiple people. My world tilted on its axis. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was a stranger to me. She had been living a double life, a secret life of lies and deceit. I felt a profound sense of disillusionment, a loss of innocence that I knew I would never recover from. The pain was unbearable, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my legs weak, my head spinning. I needed to get out of the house, to breathe, to escape the suffocating reality of my situation. I grabbed my jacket and keys, fleeing into the night. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of colors. My mind was racing, trying to process the enormity of what I had discovered. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of pain and confusion. How could I have been so blind, so naive? How could I have missed the signs? The questions echoed in my mind, a relentless chorus of self-recrimination. I had always prided myself on my intuition, my ability to read people. But I had been completely fooled. Victoria had played me for a fool. And the worst part was I didn't know why. The initial shock and rage gradually gave way to a chilling calmness. A strange detachment settled over me, a sense of emotional numbness that allowed me to think clearly, to plan. I couldn't simply walk away, pretend this hadn't happened. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. I needed to do something, to take action, to reclaim some sense of control. Divorce was a given, of course. But it wasn't enough. It wouldn't erase the pain, the humiliation, the sense of violation. I needed more. I needed justice. I needed revenge. The idea took root in my mind, a seed of darkness that grew with every passing hour. I wouldn't simply let her walk away with her life intact, her reputation unscathed. I would make her pay. I would make them all pay. Mark, the other men, everyone who had been complicit in her deceit. They would all suffer the consequences of their actions. I spent the next few days in a haze of activity, fueled by a cold, relentless fury. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional who specialized in matrimonial cases. He was expensive, but I didn't care. I wanted irrefutable proof, detailed documentation of her infidelity. I wanted to know everything. The names, the dates, the locations, the extent of her betrayal. The investigator delivered, exceeding my expectations. He provided me with a comprehensive report, complete with photographs, videos, and detailed accounts of her clandestine meetings. The evidence was overwhelming, a damning indictment of her deceit. I pored over the report, each detail fueling my anger, solidifying my resolve. I learned that her affair with Mark had been going on for months, their secret rendezvous taking place in hotels, in his office, even in our own home while I was away on business trips. I discovered that she had been seeing other men as well, men from our social circle, men I considered friends. The betrayal cut deep, a knife twisting in my gut. But the report also revealed something else, something that surprised me. Victoria wasn't just motivated by lust or boredom. She was unhappy, deeply unhappy. She felt neglected, unappreciated, invisible. She craved attention, validation, a sense of excitement that she felt was missing from our marriage. The realization gave me pause. Was I partly to blame for her infidelity? Had I been so focused on my work, on building our life together, that I had neglected her emotional needs? The thought gnawed at me, a flicker of self-doubt momentarily eclipsing my anger. But then I would remember the lies, the deceit, the sheer audacity of her actions, and my resolve would harden. No matter what my shortcomings, they didn't justify her betrayal. She had made her choices, and now she would have to face the consequences. Armed with the evidence, I began to formulate my plan. Revenge wouldn't be a single act, a swift and brutal strike. It would be a carefully orchestrated campaign, a slow and methodical dismantling of her life and the lives of those who had betrayed me. I would use their own weaknesses against them, exploiting their vulnerabilities, turning their secrets into weapons. I would strip them of their reputations, their careers, their relationships, everything they held dear. They would be left with nothing but the ashes of their shattered lives, a constant reminder of the pain they had inflicted upon me. My first target was Mark. He was the most obvious choice, the one who had triggered this whole chain of events. I knew his career was his Achilles heel. He was ambitious, driven, obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder. I would use that ambition against him, turning his success into his downfall. I began by subtly undermining his position at work, planting seeds of doubt about his competence, his integrity. I spread rumors about his personal life, hinting at financial irregularities, questionable business dealings. I used my network of contacts to isolate him, to cut him off from potential clients and collaborators. The effect was gradual but devastating. Mark's confidence began to erode, his performance faltered, his reputation tarnished. He became withdrawn, paranoid. His once bright eyes clouded with suspicion and fear. I watched his descent with a cold satisfaction, a sense of perverse pleasure in his misfortune. But my revenge wasn't limited to Mark. I targeted the other men as well, each one receiving a personalized form of retribution tailored to their specific weaknesses. One, a prominent politician, was exposed for his hypocrisy. His secret liaisons with prostitutes and escorts splashed across the tabloids. Another, a respected academic, was discredited for plagiarism, his career ruined by allegations of intellectual theft. Each act of revenge brought me a fleeting sense of satisfaction, a momentary respite from the pain. But it was never enough. The emptiness inside me remained, a gaping wound that refused to heal. I knew that true closure would only come when I confronted Victoria, when I made her face the consequences of her actions. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed to savor the moment, to revel in the destruction I had wrought. I needed to see her world crumble before I delivered the final blow. While I orchestrated the downfall of those who had betrayed me, I maintained a facade of normalcy in my own life. I continued to go to work, to attend social events, to play the role of the devoted husband. No one suspected a thing. Victoria, however, was growing increasingly uneasy. She sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the subtle changes in my behavior. She noticed the way I watched her, the flicker of something cold and hard in my eyes. She felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, but she couldn't pinpoint the source of her unease. I played with her paranoia, dropping subtle hints, making veiled references to her infidelity. I would leave her phone unlocked, knowing she would be tempted to check my messages. I would casually mention Mark's name, watching her reaction, enjoying the flicker of fear in her eyes. I was a puppet master, pulling the strings, orchestrating her descent into madness. She became withdrawn, suspicious, her once vibrant personality fading into a shadow of its former self. She started making mistakes at work, her performance slipping, her colleagues whispering behind her back. Her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel, and she had no idea why. I watched her unraveling with a detached fascination, a scientist observing a lab rat in a maze. I knew the truth would come out eventually, but I wanted to prolong the agony, to savor her fear and uncertainty. I wanted her to suffer, to experience the same pain and humiliation she had inflicted upon me. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, I decided to confront her. I had been waiting for this moment, anticipating it with a mixture of dread and excitement. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized that I knew everything, that her carefully constructed web of lies had been exposed. "Victoria," I said, my voice calm, controlled. "We need to talk." She turned to me, her eyes wide with apprehension. "About what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "About this," I said, holding up her phone. The screen displayed a picture of her and Mark, their arms entwined, their faces pressed together in a passionate kiss. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and shaken. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked like a cornered animal, trapped, desperate. "I know everything, Victoria," I said, my voice hardening. "About Mark, about the others. I know all about your little games." She collapsed onto the bed, her body shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I don't know what came over me. I didn't mean to hurt you." Her apologies were hollow, meaningless. I had heard them all before. They were the words of a coward, a manipulator, someone who was only sorry because she had been caught. "Save your breath, Victoria," I said coldly. "It's too late for apologies. The confrontation with Victoria was just the beginning. I had exposed her lies, shattered her illusions, but I wasn't finished yet. I wanted her to understand the full extent of the damage she had caused, the pain she had inflicted. I wanted her to feel the same isolation, the same sense of betrayal that I had experienced. I began by systematically dismantling her support network, turning her friends and family against her. I planted seeds of doubt, spreading rumors about her infidelity, her instability, her manipulative behavior. I painted her as a victimizer, not a victim, shifting the blame, turning the narrative in my favor. People were eager to believe the worst, their sympathy quickly turning to condemnation. Victoria's friends, once so supportive, distanced themselves, their phone calls and invitations dwindling to nothing. Her family, initially hesitant, eventually succumbed to the weight of the evidence, their trust eroded by my carefully crafted lies. She was left alone, isolated, with no one to turn to but me, and I offered no comfort, no solace. I was her tormentor, her jailer, the architect of her misery. I watched her crumble, her spirit broken, her confidence shattered. The vibrant, vivacious woman I had once loved was gone, replaced by a hollow shell, haunted by guilt and shame. But my revenge wasn't just about isolating her. I wanted to destroy her reputation, to make her a pariah in our social circle. I leaked the information about her affairs to the press, ensuring that her infidelity became public knowledge. The story was picked up by the tabloids, her name and picture splashed across the front pages. She became a subject of gossip, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones at cocktail parties. Her career suffered, her colleagues avoiding her, her clients withdrawing their business. She was ostracized, shunned, her once bright future dimmed by the shadow of her past. I watched her downfall with a cold satisfaction, a sense of perverse pleasure in her misfortune. She had betrayed me, humiliated me, and now she was paying the price. But even as I reveled in her destruction, a part of me felt a pang of regret. Was this what I really wanted? To see her broken, defeated, stripped of everything she held dear? Was this the justice I had craved? Or was I simply perpetuating the cycle of pain and betrayal, becoming the very thing I despised? The public humiliation of Victoria was a turning point. It marked the beginning of the end, the final act in my carefully orchestrated revenge. She became a recluse, withdrawing from the world, hiding from the prying eyes and judgmental whispers. She stopped going to work, stopped answering the phone, stopped leaving the house. The curtains remained drawn, the lights off, the silence within the walls deafening. I would come home from work to find her curled up on the couch, her eyes vacant, her body listless. She barely ate, barely slept, her once vibrant energy replaced by a chilling apathy. I watched her deteriorate with a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. Satisfaction at seeing my plan come to fruition, guilt at the role I had played in her destruction. I had wanted her to suffer, but this was more than I had bargained for. She was a shell of her former self, a ghost haunting the empty rooms of our once happy home. The house itself became a reflection of her state of mind. Dust gathered on the furniture, cobwebs hung in the corners, the air thick with a sense of neglect and decay. The garden, once her pride and joy, withered and died, the vibrant colors replaced by a dull, lifeless brown. It was as if the life had been sucked out of the place, leaving behind a hollow shell, a monument to our shattered dreams. One evening, as I sat in my study, working late, I heard a noise from upstairs. It was a faint sound, a muffled sob, but it was enough to pierce the silence that had enveloped the house. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But another part of me, a part one had tried to suppress, urged me to go to her to offer some comfort, some solace. I rose from my chair, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached her bedroom door, my hand hovering over the knob. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside the window. Victoria lay curled up on the bed, her body shaking with sobs. I approached her cautiously, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hand tentatively reaching out to touch her. She flinched at my touch, but didn't pull away. I sat there for a long time, just holding her, letting her cry. Her tears soaked through my shirt, warm and wet against my skin. I didn't say anything, didn't offer any words of comfort. There was nothing I could say that would make any difference. The damage had been done. As the weeks turned into months, Victoria's condition worsened. The isolation, the guilt, the public shame had taken their toll. She became withdrawn, apathetic, her once bright spark extinguished. She lost interest in everything that had once brought her joy. Her friends, her hobbies, her work. She spent her days wandering aimlessly through the house, a ghost haunting the empty rooms. Her nights were filled with nightmares, her sleep punctuated by cries of terror and despair. I watched her decline with a growing sense of unease. My revenge had taken on a life of its own, spiraling out of control. I had wanted her to suffer, but not like this. I had wanted her to feel pain, but not this kind of pain. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of my own complicity in her destruction. I had become the very thing I had despised, a manipulator, a tormentor, a destroyer of lives. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. I had sought justice, but I had found only emptiness. I had sought revenge, but I had found only regret. One day, I came home from work to find Victoria sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of pills in front of her. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a chilling emptiness. "I can't take it anymore," she whispered. "I just want it all to end." My heart sank. I knew what she was planning. I had pushed her to the brink, and now she was ready to jump. I rushed to her side, grabbing the bottle of pills from her hand. "Don't do this, Victoria," I pleaded. "Please don't." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of despair and defiance. "Why not?" she asked. "What do I have left to live for?" Her words cut me to the core. I had taken everything from her. Her friends, her family, her career, her reputation, her self-respect. I had left her with nothing but pain and emptiness. "You have me," I said, my voice cracking. "You still have me." She laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound. "You?" she said. "You're the one who did this to me. You're the one who destroyed me." Her words were like a slap in the face. She was right. I was the one who had orchestrated her downfall, who had turned her world upside down. I had been so consumed by my own pain, my own need for revenge, that I had forgotten about her, about the woman I had once loved. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I never meant for things to go this far." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you mean that?" she asked. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I do," I said.
I truli do kropka.
She reached out and took my hand, her touch surprisingly strong. "Then help me," she said. "Help me get through this." I squeezed her hand, a surge of hope coursing through me. "I will," I said. "I promise." The road to recovery was long and arduous. Victoria's emotional wounds ran deep, her spirit scarred by the trauma she had endured. She started seeing a therapist, a compassionate woman who specialized in trauma and abuse. The therapy sessions were painful, dredging up buried memories, forcing her to confront the demons that haunted her. But they were also cathartic, allowing her to process her emotions, to begin to heal. I supported her every step of the way, attending therapy sessions with her, listening to her pain, offering words of encouragement and support. I learned to be patient, to understand that healing takes time, that there would be setbacks and challenges along the way. I also sought therapy for myself, confronting my own demons, my own complicity in the events that had transpired. I learned to take responsibility for my actions, to acknowledge the pain I had caused. The therapy was difficult, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself, about my own capacity for darkness. But it was also liberating, allowing me to shed the burden of guilt and shame that had weighed me down for so long. Slowly, gradually, Victoria began to heal. The nightmares became less frequent, the tears less readily shed. She started to take an interest in the world again, rediscovering old hobbies, reconnecting with friends and family. She even started talking about going back to work, about rebuilding her career. I watched her transformation with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She was a survivor, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And I was grateful for the opportunity to be a part of her healing journey, to make amends for the pain I had caused. Our relationship, however, remained fragile. The trust had been broken, the wounds still raw. We were both different people now, changed by the events that had transpired. We had to learn to navigate this new reality, to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty and vulnerability. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of anger, moments of despair. But we persevered, clinging to the hope that we could find a way to move forward, to create a new future together. As Victoria healed, I found myself wrestling with a new set of emotions. The anger and resentment that had fueled my revenge began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of loss. I mourned the life we had once shared, the carefree laughter, the easy companionship, the shared dreams and aspirations. I realized that in seeking to punish Victoria, I had also punished myself. I had cut myself off from the woman I loved, the woman who had been my best friend, my confidant, my lover. I had created a void in my own life, a loneliness that was more profound than any pain she could have inflicted. I began to see her not as the villain in my story, but as a fellow victim, a casualty of our own shared failings. We had both made mistakes, both contributed to the breakdown of our relationship. I had been too focused on my work, too neglectful of her emotional needs. She had sought solace in the arms of others, betraying the trust we had built over years. We were both guilty, both wounded, both in need of healing. This realization brought a new level of complexity to our relationship. It was no longer a simple matter of right and wrong, of victim and perpetrator. We were both victims, both perpetrators, both responsible for the pain we had inflicted on each other. This understanding brought a new level of empathy and compassion to our interactions. We began to see each other not as adversaries, but as allies, two people struggling to navigate the wreckage of their shared past. We started to talk more openly, more honestly, sharing our fears and vulnerabilities, our hopes and dreams. We began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, brick by fragile brick. It was a slow process, fraught with challenges and setbacks. But we were both committed to the journey, determined to find a way to salvage something from the ashes of our broken marriage. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Victoria turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "I want a divorce," she said quietly. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known it was coming, had even anticipated it, but hearing her say it out loud was still a blow. I had spent the last few months trying to rebuild our relationship, to salvage what we had lost. But deep down, I knew it was a futile effort. The damage was too deep, the trust too broken. We were two different people now, our paths diverging. "I understand," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She reached out and took my hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this isn't what you wanted." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's not. But it's what we both need." We sat in silence for a while, watching the last rays of sunlight fade below the horizon. The air was still, the only sound the chirping of crickets in the distance. "What will you do?" I asked finally. She shrugged. "I don't know," she said. "Start over, I guess. Find a new place to live, a new job, a new life." "Will you stay in the city?" She hesitated. "I don't think so," she said. "Too many memories here. Too much pain." I nodded. I understood. This city held too many ghosts for both of us. "I wish you all the best," I said. She smiled sadly. "Thank you," she said. "You too." We sat in silence for a few more minutes. Then she rose to her feet. "I should go," she said. I stood up and walked her to the door. We stood there for a moment, facing each other, the weight of our shared history hanging heavy between us. "Goodbye, Alexander," she said. "Goodbye, Victoria," I said. She turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the darkness. I watched her go, a wave of sadness washing over me. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in my life. But it was also a new beginning, a chance for both of us to start over, to find happiness and fulfillment in our own separate ways. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was a surprisingly amicable process, devoid of the acrimony and bitterness that often accompany such proceedings. We had both come to terms with the end of our marriage, recognizing that it was the best outcome for both of us. We divided our assets fairly, sold the house, and went our separate ways. Victoria moved to a small town on the coast, far away from the city and the memories it held. She found a job as a librarian, a quiet, unassuming role that suited her introverted nature. She made new friends, joined a book club, and started taking yoga classes. Slowly, gradually, she began to rebuild her life, piece by fragile piece. I stayed in the city, but I moved to a new apartment, a smaller, more modest place that reflected my new reality. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the familiar routines and challenges of my career. I also started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, giving back to the community, trying to make amends for the harm I had caused. The work was humbling, reminding me of the fragility of life, the importance of compassion and empathy. It also brought me into contact with people from all walks of life, people who had faced challenges far greater than my own. Their stories inspired me, their resilience gave me hope. I didn't date, didn't even consider the possibility of another relationship. The wounds from my marriage were still too fresh, the memories too painful. I needed time to heal, to rediscover myself, to learn to trust again. I spent my evenings reading, listening to music, taking long walks in the park. I reconnected with old friends, neglected during the tumultuous years of my marriage. I even started taking piano lessons again, a childhood passion I had long abandoned. The music filled the silence in my apartment, soothing my soul, reminding me of the beauty and joy that still existed in the world.